What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Spill the Real, the home of unfiltered conversations and real-world truth right here on SugarWaterRadio.com.
It's 2026, and if you're rocking with us right now, you already know what time it is. This is the show where nothing's scripted, nothing's sugar-coated, and nobody's safe from the truth.
It's your hosts, Dana Lucen and Mark Miller, and we're here to spill the real on everything from culture and politics to the streets, the media, and the power plays they don't want you questioning.
If you're new, welcome.
If you've been riding with us, you're already family.
So wherever you're listening from, lock in, turn it up, and get ready.
Because once we start, ain't no rewinding the truth.
Let's get into it.
All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're unpacking a moment in time that, frankly, political analysts are going to be studying for decades.
We are. We're zeroing in on a single day, January 3rd, 2026.
And on this day, we have two just massive events colliding. We've got sources detailing this incredibly dramatic, sudden U.S. military operation in Venezuela.
And at the exact same time, back home, you have the stalled, highly contested release of the Jeffrey Epstein files.
It's this collision of geopolitics, media narratives, and, this looming question of domestic accountability. The timing is, well, it's everything.
It is everything. Our analysis today isn't just about what happened. It's about how the timing of these two stories fundamentally changed the entire public conversation.
Right. It rerouted the political priorities for, really, the rest of the year.
The entire year.
So we have to unpack this. We have to go beyond just saying, oh, what a coincidence, because all the source material we have, and I mean all of it, describes this as a textbook.
A wag the dog moment.
Exactly, a wag the dog moment, when this huge foreign spectacle is just perfectly timed to eclipse a really damaging domestic issue.
And, whether it was deliberately calculated or just brilliantly exploited after the fact, the effect was the same. When you map out the timeline side by side, the synchronization is just astonishing.
Okay, let's do that. Let's lay out the context. Because the pressure cooker on the domestic side, that Epstein file release, that wasn't new. It had been building for a long, long time.
Oh, it was seismic. If you go back to, say, December 2025, just a month before, congressional pressure had hit a boiling point.
It wasn't a fringe issue anymore.
Not at all. The momentum to get those Epstein files disclosed was relentless. You had activist groups, you had a small but very loud bipartisan group in Congress, and public anticipation was just at a fever pitch.
Because everyone felt that this was it. This was the moment for some real elite accountability.
That was the expectation. The sources we have, they frame this not just as, a political headache for the administration. They call it a deep metastasizing crisis of public confidence.
A crisis in the system itself?
Exactly. And the idea that powerful people are held to the same standard.
Yeah.
And while all that tension is peaking, the gears of the military are turning fast in a completely different direction.
Towards Venezuela.
Right. On January 1st and 2nd of 2026, our sources confirmed there was this sudden rapid escalation. Final operational plans for a decisive move in Venezuela were locked in.
So the groundwork was already there, but this was the final. Go ahead.
The groundwork was subtle. Months of, quiet support for opposition groups, more sanctions, intelligence gathering. But the final deployment was incredibly swift, so the stage was perfectly set.
You have one event promising this complex, politically toxic legal reckoning at home.
And the other promising a decisive, visually stunning, and frankly very simple military victory abroad.
And then, January 3rd, the explosion, as the sources call it. The operation launches. Maduro is captured.
And global headlines just explode. The narrative shift, the speed of it was almost hard to believe as it was happening.
It was total displacement.
Total. The Epstein file story, which is nuanced, legally complicated, domestically explosive, a story about corruption and institutional failure, it was instantly, and I mean instantly, pushed off every major news broadcast.
Every digital front page, every social media feed.
Everything. The spectacle of the foreign crisis just consumed all the oxygen in the room. It proved, really, that in our modern media age, attention is the single most valuable resource.
And it can be redirected with ruthless efficiency.
Just like that.
Okay, let's focus on the spectacle itself then. Section 1. The Venezuela operation. The sources all emphasize this wasn't some slow invasion. This was a surgical strike. What do we know about the actual details of the operation?
It was internally codenamed Operation Sovereign Dawn, and it was built for two things: maximum visual impact and minimal U.S. casualties. It leaned very heavily on special operations forces, air superiority, that kind of thing.
So not a massive ground force.
No, not at all. The reports suggest that key units focused on securing critical infrastructure almost instantaneously. We're talking about the Miraflores Palace in Caracas, where they captured Maduro and his wife.
The centers of power.
And communication. The state television broadcasting centers were among the first targets. And crucially, the headquarters of the state oil company.
Ah, the oil headquarters. We'll come back to that.
We definitely will. But that speed was strategic. It was designed to preempt any kind of organized resistance from military factions loyal to Maduro. It was over before they could even react.
And the official narrative from the U.S. followed almost immediately. They announced temporary governance control before the dust had even settled. How did they frame that? For the world, but more importantly for the audience back home.
The framing was critical.
Yeah.
And it was very, very careful. It was presented not as an invasion, not as regime change. The term used was a humanitarian-driven stabilization effort.
Stabilization, that's the key word.
That's the key word. U.S. officials claimed they were responding to a collapsing state, that they were preventing wider regional instability, preventing a mass migration crisis. It was all about stopping a bad situation from getting worse.
Was there any legal justification offered?
Oh, there was a legal fig leaf, but it was complex. They invoked some prior resolutions from the Organization of American States, the OAS, about state failure. They coupled that with claims that Maduro's regime had forfeited its legitimacy through, human rights abuses and drug trafficking allegations that have been around for years.
So they cobbled together a justification, but the headlines, the things people actually saw, they weren't that complex. They were simple. Trump captures Maduro.
Venezuela under U.S. control. It was designed to be overwhelming and incredibly decisive. It took decades of complex U.S.-Venezuela relations and boiled it down into a clean, triumphant 5-word narrative.
And that headline dominance, that's the engine of the distraction, isn't it?
It's the whole engine. Because the actual complexity, the legal debates about intervention, the long-term cost of nation building, the risk of getting bogged down in a regional conflict, all of that was just suppressed.
It vanished. For the domestic audience, complexity was just swapped out for moral clarity. Good guys and bad guys.
It was a masterclass in messaging. It really relied on these 3 powerful, familiar archetypes that the American public could immediately understand.
Okay, break those down for us. What were the 3 pillars?
First, you have the decisive actor. The president, framed as the strong, effective commander-in-chief. Someone who can solve a problem that's been festering for years with one single decisive action. It's the leadership narrative.
The hero.
The hero. Second, the clear villain, Maduro. He was already seen globally as an authoritarian who had destroyed his country's economy. So there's no moral ambiguity there for the audience. He's the bad guy. It's an easy justification.
And the third pillar.
The straightforward goal. Stability. Humanitarian relief. That taps into this deep, unifying desire people have for order and justice. It doesn't matter what the geopolitical nuances are. Everyone can get behind the idea of helping people and creating stability.
So it basically turns a really complicated geopolitical chess move into a simple comic book story.
Good versus evil. And the success of that story hinged on more than just the words they used. It was about rapid emotional amplification.
The images.
The images. That is the key to the wag the dog effect. It's about emotional velocity. Our sources highlight how these very carefully managed images, specifically footage of what were presented as cheering crowds in Caracas, were blasted out.
Along with triumphant messages from official government social media accounts.
Right. And the goal was to establish a sense of popular approval before any real journalism, any real scrutiny could even begin.
It's cognitive priming.
That's exactly the term for it. If the first thing you see is a positive, celebratory context, then the psychological burden shifts. It falls on the critics to disprove what looks like an immediate success.
And that speed is what makes it work, because that emotional unity, that feeling of we're all on the same side here, it travels instantly online.
Well, critical scrutiny takes time. It means you have to slow down, read dense reports, ask uncomfortable questions about international law and long-term consequences.
And in the modern attention economy, there's no time for that. Speed always wins.
It does. The celebratory images, the simple good versus evil story, that's high bandwidth content. It's easy to digest. A discussion about which specific articles of the OAS charter were being violated.
That's low bandwidth.
Very low bandwidth. And when public attention is a finite resource, the visceral spectacle will always displace the nuanced truth.
Which brings us to the real geopolitical why. Let's move from the public show to the strategic imperatives that are detailed in the source material. This is where it gets really interesting. because the public narrative was about stability. But the real motivation for global powers is almost always about the assets.
And the motivation here wasn't just humanitarian, even though that was the public rationale. It was rooted in Venezuela's immovable, undeniable strategic position. The pressure point has always been its physical asset.
The oil.
The oil.
Yeah.
Venezuela possesses the largest proven oil reserves on the entire planet. Over 300 billion barrels, according to estimates.
Now, a lot of that is heavy crude, right? Harder to refine.
It is. It requires significant infrastructure, a lot of investment to get it out of the ground and process it. But the sheer volume is undeniable. It's a game changer.
So resource leverage, that was the quiet driver behind the very loud narrative of stabilization.
Precisely. The source material, and this is citing top energy security analysts, it details resource leverage as the #1 strategic objective. This move was about securing energy influence in what was already a very volatile global market.
A market that was being destabilized by conflicts elsewhere.
Exactly. Ongoing conflicts in the Middle East, increasing competition with rival powers like China and Russia. This was a move to secure a massive energy source in America's own backyard.
I want to push on the details of that, though. It's not just that they have oil, it's about controlling the flow, the refining. What specific influence did securing that capacity give the U.S. in the global energy market, like overnight?
It gave them immense, multifaceted power. First, and most obviously, direct influence over global energy supply. By controlling the future output of Venezuelan oil, the U.S. could effectively act like a global thermostat for crude oil.
To turn the supply up or down as needed?
To manage supply, bottlenecks, or surpluses. But second, and this is maybe even more crucial, it gave them pricing leverage. Venezuela's heavy crude needs very specific, deep conversion refineries. Controlling that resource allows the U.S. to stabilize, or if it wanted to, strategically destabilize global energy prices.
It's a tool to manipulate the entire global economic outlook.
It really is. And the sources also emphasize a secondary effect here that's really important, sanctions relief.
Ah, right, because if the U.S. is in temporary control of the government...
They control the light switch, they get to decide which international companies get access to those oil fields and under what terms.
And you can bet American companies would be first in line.
That's a critical detail that gets lost in the big headlines. The U.S. could unilaterally set the rules, prioritizing American or allied energy firms for the huge job of rebuilding Venezuela's crumbling oil infrastructure. It was basically a guaranteed massive transfer of future energy wealth and influence.
And in the process, it weakens the influence of groups like OPEC+.
Absolutely. By introducing a massive new source of supply that's not under their control. It's a long-term play for leverage over the entire Latin American energy complex.
And the source material connects this directly to historical patterns, right? It suggests that controlling resources has always been more important than the ideological stories we tell.
It's a consistent theme in history. Resource nationalism, especially for strategic things like oil, has always driven interventionist foreign policy, no matter what the stated public reason is.
The sources draw parallels to the Cold War, right?
Yeah, they do. To mid-20th century interventions where securing access to raw materials was cloaked in the language of anti-communism or promoting democracy. Venezuela's energy wealth elevates it from just a regional problem to a primary global strategic prize.
So the stability narrative, the humanitarian angle, it was necessary camouflage.
Necessary camouflage for the consolidation of significant economic power and military reach.
Okay, so now we have to shift our focus. We have to look at the story that was completely buried by all of this. The domestic crisis that was hitting its breaking point just as U.S. forces were seizing Caracas.
The slow, contested, and